Colorado's an awesome place to live. And no matter how much homes cost, people want to live here. It's like Disneyland. They can charge whatever they want for tickets, do whatever they want. They can be in the news for all the wrong reasons. And the parks are always still filled to capacity because people want to go there. That said, there's a lot of legislation being proposed that's going to impact home ownership, both for landlords and just regular homeowners. And we're going to dig into that a little bit today, and we'll talk about what's happening in the market and what that might mean to you. This first bill is called the Cause Required for Eviction of a Residential Tenant. And it's a little bit misleading. These laws aren't always named honestly, because when I consider an eviction, I consider that somebody who has not lived up to the terms of the lease, and I am evicting them. What this eviction means is your lease is up and I do not want to renew it as a landlord, so I'm evicting you. At least the early iterations of this law propose that as a landlord, if you don't want to renew a lease, you may have to pay 2 or 3 months worth of rent for that person to get another place. So it's incredibly onerous on the landlord, and it's very tenant friendly. And what this is going to do is make it much harder for tenants to rent houses. Landlords will be more picky, they'll be more selective, and it's not going to do what they want it to do, but it will make it harder for people to rent homes. I'm going to skip by some of these, like this fire hardened building materials and real property. This next one is going to impact landlords again, make it harder for people to rent homes. This says you can modify rental premises for a person with a disability. And right now you can do that. As a landlord, I can rent to you if you have some sort of disability, you need a wheelchair ramp, you need to make the home more wheelchair accessible, you can do that. The requirement is that you have to put the home back to the way it was before you moved in. So this law removes any kind of requirement for you to put the home back. So if you put in a wheelchair ramp, it doesn't have to be removed. If you've widened doorways for a wheelchair, you don't have to restore the house to the way it would be for anybody else. So that one will make it harder. And a landlord can't deny renting to somebody with a disability. So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. I see lawsuits coming over that one. The next bill I want to talk about is meant to prohibit residential occupancy limits. So right now, you can rent a house, and some municipalities call it 2+U. So you can rent a home and have 3 people who aren't related on the lease in that home. And this just removes that limit. So if you have a 5-bedroom house and 5 college kids want to rent it, they can do that. There's no requirement that any municipality can have that prevents that. I'm curious about that. If I want to rent a 5-bedroom house with 9 other people,
I need 40,
and we all bunk up and there's 2 people in each room, that's 10 people in a house. Is that going to be allowed? Is that going to be a requirement of a landlord to do that? And I tend to think that it is. So we'll see how that one plays out. That gets really interesting because this next bill that they're talking about is the safe housing for residential tenants, which means if the furnace goes out and it's cold, as a landlord, I need to provide you some housing out of decency. If your house is not working and your tenants are cold, you should put them in a place where they are warm. But if you have 10 people in a house, how many hotel rooms do you have to rent, and for how long until your furnace is fixed? So what that could end up doing is just mean that landlords charge more money. All these things that are being proposed have been tried in places like New York and California, and none of that has really worked to keep rents down. If you live in an HOA or a metro district, there are a lot of laws pertaining to those types of communities. The HOA delinquency payments enforcement procedures, the metro district covenant enforcement policy. Those are some bills that are going to provide additional regulation for those types of areas. So if that's of interest to you, check those out. The next bill pertains to price gouging on rentals after some sort of declared disaster. My question on that is, what's a disaster? If we have hail and it's declared a disaster area, does that keep me from raising my rent $50 to $100 when the lease is up? Nobody wants to be a proponent for some sort of unscrupulous landlord, and they're certainly out there. But I'll be interested to see how this plays out. My guess is this is just going to end up in court, and judges will end up settling out all the ambiguities from this proposed law. Protections for real property owners, which will make it easier for a customer to sue a builder or an architect or a contractor for shoddy workmanship. There's a bill proposed. It's going to put some regulation on community association managers. Those are people who take care of communities with, covenants and restrictions. And this will provide some licensing and oversight through the Division of Real Estate. So if you're in a neighborhood like that, go ahead and check that out. This next one is a very lengthy and complex bill. It is housing in transit-oriented communities. And really what it does is it sets up some additional layers of government. And what they really want is apartments near trains. They want high density housing near public transportation. And they're probably going to get that on some level. A lot of people want to be close to the trains. They want to be close to the metro. Colorado Springs, we don't really have much of that, but that might include being close to the bus system. So there are going to be some benefits to doing that, and there will be some fines and penalties if people don't participate in that. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. These next bills aren't particularly interesting. There's one that prohibits using algorithms to determine what rent should be for a house. Another one on what a remediation of fire damage looks like. If there is soot or smoke damage, how do they remediate that, and putting some requirements on that will impact insurance companies. Probably push insurance rates higher, but obviously this is something that somebody feels like is important. Probably again from that Boulder fire. A lot of homes got a lot of smoke damage, and maybe they didn't get insurance to mitigate that the way they thought they should. There's a bill here about Medicaid coverage for housing and nutrition services, and I think that's just commissioning a study. The next bill is a lot more interesting, and it's the Sustainable Affordable Housing Assistance. I'll click on it here so you can see how long this bill is. It's very lengthy, and usually the longer a bill is, the more expensive it is, the more onerous it is on people. And what this really means is that there's going to be a lot of affordable housing paid for by other people, and it doesn't really allow the market to reset. It just means that this organization gets federal grant money or state money, and or both. And what they do is then they subsidize these rents, but it doesn't really provide affordable housing, maybe to a few people. But overall, this is going to be a very expensive bill that's going to cost everybody more money and will push up rents for everybody. There's a proposed law about unlawful restrictions in land records. You can look that up on your own. There's a law coming out that's going to change some of the restrictions that are put on home-based businesses. You may have an HOA or a municipality that says you can't have a home-based business, and this is going to kind of clear that up a little bit. Check that out. That one's interesting. This next bill covers a tax credit for commercial building conversions. After COVID, a lot of people didn't go back to the office. A lot of businesses went under, and this commercial space is empty now. And what they want to do is convert that into residential. But it's expensive. And what I'm told is if it's a $10 million building, they could convert it to residential and make it worth their while if that building was purchased for $5 million. But they have to add a lot of plumbing, and the buildings they're not the same. So there's a lot of money that goes into that. This provides some tax credits to make it more worthwhile for people to want to convert those. We'll see how that plays out. But tax credits just means that somebody else is paying for it. The next one is accessory dwelling units. That would be if you wanted to put a second home on the back of your lot, you could do that and maybe make a little extra rent. There's a bill here about property owner unit association collections. Not very interesting. This next one is pretty wild. It's local government's rights to property for affordable housing. So if there is some sort of affordable housing in place, maybe they have a contract. What that does is I have a building, there's some affordable housing there, and I want to sell it, and I sell it to you for $2 million. What the government can do is say, we have a first right of refusal on that. And they tried to pass this last year and it didn't go through. But as a municipality or some sort of government entity, I can agree to buy that house for $2 million and take it from you. You don't get to buy it for $2 million because there's affordable housing in place. And then the government owns that unit. So we'll see how that goes. That one should scare everybody. The next bill is a modification of tax credits to preserve historic structures. Not particularly interesting. The next one is an effective implementation of affordable housing programs. Government does not go well with effective implementation or affordable. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I know it sounds like that one's just going to cost a lot of money. And the next bill is the mobile homes and mobile home parks. And what that does is it takes landlords and requires them to pay for interpreters. And it puts some pretty strict restrictions on folks that are renting in trailer parks. And not to pick on trailer parks, they're an affordable place to live, and sometimes that's just all you can afford. And this is going to make it more expensive, because if you tell me as a landlord that I have to provide all of these things, then I'm looking at my potential costs, and that's just going to cost me more money, and I'm going to pass that along to the tenant in the form of higher rents. The next bill is another one about accessory dwelling units. This one's from the Senate. The first one was from the House, but we'll see how those two marry up. I would say that this legislative session will make it easier for you to put a second home on your own property if that's something you're interested in. So a lot of these bills are aimed at affordable housing, or kind of these people that don't make a lot of money. This next bill, I don't know who they're writing this for, if they're writing this because some contractor has proposed it, but it's a single exit stairway for multifamily structures. And what that means is, let's say I have a fourplex, I only need one stairway to get out. There's only one exit. And right now the law requires at least two. This is going to change that. Fire departments aren't for this. I don't know anybody who's really for this, but we'll see how that goes. But seems like that would make homes a little less safe. Mortgage services disperse insurance proceeds. You can check that out if you want to. Exempt small communities from HOA requirements. So if you live in a small neighborhood, that might be of interest to you. Construction defect action procedures to give you some protections if they're, construction defects, obviously. Right to remedy construction defects. That's a big one. It mostly pertains to condos. And what it'll do is make it easier for a contractor to avoid being responsible for any kind of defects in the construction. I'm not a big proponent of that one. What their goal is, they say the goal is they want to build more condos because condos cost a little bit less. But what I see with this is, this is just going to be a nightmare down the road, and people who own those condos are going to be the ones that pay the price. The next bill pertains to HOA foreclosures. Those are pretty rare. I won't cover that. And then construction professional insurance coverage transparency. So I think that'll make it easier for consumers to verify their contractors are insured. And that's a huge one. We just had a contractor here in Colorado Springs got busted. They took something like $2 million from people. And, I think they're in jail right now. Maybe they bailed out. But, these contractors really screw people over. And it's all the time. You'll see somebody starts a roof or starts a construction job, and then they just disappear. And the consequences are so few that these contractors keep doing it. So hopefully this will help with that. Thanks for sticking with me through all these bills. There's a reason I covered this. One, because I love it, real estate, and I'm interested in it. The other is that we have an increasingly left-leaning legislature in Colorado. And I don't mean for this to be political. I don't really care what people think. But I think a lot of people aren't aware of just how left-leaning this legislature is. So maybe if we could get some balance in there, and we'd have enough people in place that we could stop some of this really expensive, bad legislation that's bad for homeowners. Some of this legislation that's going to be bad for renters too. People aren't going to get cheaper rent. Like I said, they did a lot of these things in New York, and rents are higher there than they've ever been before. So this is only going to get worse. When I say we have a left-leaning legislature, there was a vacancy last year, and when they were given a chance to fill the vacant seat, they chose to fill it with Tim Hernandez. And Tim Hernandez, he's denied being Marxist and whatever. I don't care what people think about Marxism. You can hash that out on your own. But we should at least have an honest discussion about it. And he was asked about violent revolution because he said we needed a forceful revolution. And he kind of danced around what that meant, but pressed on whether or not he would advocate for a violent revolution. He really did skip all around it and basically said it's not for him to be violent, but he's not going to tell somebody else how they should revolt against the system.
People think that you were advocating for some kind of violent cultural revolution. And you said violence isn't my bag.
No.
But do you think that it is necessary or acceptable?
I'm not here to police protest.
The Democrat legislature appointed that guy to our House. And these are the bills they're proposing. They're not going to make housing more affordable. They're not going to make rent more affordable. They don't have any interest in doing that. So as a landlord, you probably are going to be raising rent soon because your costs are going up. This legislature we've raised our taxes, our insurance has gone up, everything's going up right now, and there's really no expense that they're not willing to incur. So be aware of it. Check out these bills that are coming through. And none of this has worked to reduce home prices. I don't think they even care to reduce home prices. They talk about housing, but it's more important for them to talk about housing being unaffordable than it is to bring some sort of solution. So to them, onerous restrictions on landlords they see as being something that will reduce rents instead of making it more expensive. Colorado housing is more expensive than it was last year. We sold more homes last week than we did the week before. So the market is strong. People are going to live here no matter how much Disneyland charges for the tickets. That park is packed. It doesn't matter how much it costs to live here. People are going to want to live here. But if things don't change, there's going to be a chance that Colorado goes in a direction that really nobody wants to see. So let me know what your thoughts are on this. You know, I try to talk about real estate in ways that matter to all of us. I talk about crime and education in ways that matter to all of us, because real estate's just one little piece of a community. You know, it all has to work together, and right now it's not working together. And I like to look at the reasons why. So if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments. I appreciate you watching this whole video. Thank you so much. Again, I'm a longtime real estate agent. If I can answer questions for you, let me know. My name's Kevin, and I'll catch you in the next video.